This program is brought to you in part by the Paul B. Hunter and Constance D. Hunter Charitable Foundation, Incorporated, a proud partner of WUCF-TV and the Central Florida community.
Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Phil Hoffman. Welcome to Central Florida Road Trip. This week we make a stop in Winter Garden, Florida, a town that's gone from boom to bust, and now it's booming again. A quaint community some 15 miles west of Orlando in West Orange County that has not only become a desirable location to live, but also a community that attracts visitors who are looking to enjoy a relaxed lifestyle, as well as Winter Garden's historic past.
The city got its name through the fact that you could basically grow vegetables and citrus around here practically all year round. People would come here to live and then write back home saying you could have a garden all winter, you could grow things all winter, thus the name Winter Garden. After most of the Native Americans who lived around Lake Apopka were moved west under the Indian Removal Act, settlers who were essentially farmers began to arrive in the area in the 1850s and 1860s. The muck land around the lake that attracted the Native Americans also attracted these farming settlers, and they realized they could grow just about anything around the lake.
In the late 1800s, only about 100 people lived in Winter Garden. But the railroads were about to change all of that by offering farmers a faster way to get their products to market.
The Orange Belt Railway, which later became the Atlantic Coastline Railroad, ran right through the heart of Winter Garden. So it was kind of a focal point for the downtown area. We had passenger service, but the more important part was the freight service. So this area was known as one of the larger vegetable producing and citrus producing areas of the state.
Winter Garden, despite only having a few hundred residents, becomes one of the citrus centers. At one point, 1 out of 20 oranges grown in all of Florida is grown in Winter Garden.
When the railroads came through here and Winter Garden began to grow viably as a city, it was a boon to this area. They ignited extreme growth.
To symbolize the importance of having 2 railroads in Winter Garden, both original train depots have been preserved. One houses the Central Florida Railroad Museum, while the other is home to the Winter Garden Heritage Foundation. Early Winter Garden was mostly rural, and at times a big adjustment for some of the new residents. Rod Reeves grew up in Winter Garden and remembers his mother's account of her first reaction when she arrived as a young girl in 1913.
When she got off the train here, she was 10 years old, and she said she knew she shouldn't have thought it. But she said, I thought, oh, mosquitoes, sand, sand fleas, sand spurs, heat. She said, oh, Lord, I have died and gone to hell.
The city of Winter Garden incorporated in 1908 with 191 residents. A.B. Newton was the first mayor.
A.B. Newton was one of our founding fathers. We call him Mr. First. He ended up being our first mayor when the city incorporated in 1908. He was the first postmaster. He was the first person to own a store on Plant Street. He was also the first cashier for the First National Bank. He had the first newspaper in town as well. He did a lot of things first.
A.B. Newton got the ball rolling, and by the 1920s, merchants started following the farmers, and businesses lined Plant Street.
The population was growing. People were being drawn here from all over because of farming and citrus opportunities. You could say by the mid to late 20s, this town was on the map, was something to really be proud of.
Many may think that tourism came to the area with Disney in the early 70s. But Winter Garden was a tourism hotbed starting in the 1920s.
People were making more money in the teens and early 20s. There was prosperity. Everybody could afford to drive on vacation. They came to this area particularly because of the publicity surrounding Lake Apopka, which was the largemouth bass capital of the world, as it turned out.
Lake Apopka was never a Silver Springs. It was always a shallow lake, but it was full of fish. Tourists came from all over And there were hundreds of boats there, and the city rented the boats for about $3 a day. Well, there wasn't a motor on it, they had oars, and you went out and you fish, and they got great bass out of the lake, great speckled perch.
This was a tourist mecca because of Lake Apopka and the great fishing that was available to the tourists here.
The two-story Shelby Hotel was the only hotel in Winter Garden at the time, and it was not nearly enough accommodation for all the tourists. So construction was begun on a new, larger hotel, the Edgewater.
They had originally planned the hotel to be a four-story building. This is back in 1923 and 1924. The construction of it got as far as about the first floor, and in the mid-20s, Florida had a land bust, and the original company that began that construction went out of business. So the hotel sat with its first floor constructed for a couple of years.
The Edgewater Hotel was a community project, and my dad's real estate office was across the street, and people would come into the office and they'd say, "Why should I buy property in this town when you can't even finish the hotel across the street?" So him being in the real estate business, he was able to get a group of investors from Orlando to complete the hotel.
The Edgewater was a success and attracted guests like Clark Gable and Rod Serling, who came to Winter Garden for the fishing.
In 1927, it was a big draw for people coming into the area here. It was a big centerpiece to the Winter Garden downtown. At that time, it was one of the most technologically advanced hotels in the area. It had a full sprinkler system, which was something that was a new technological advancement of the day. And there's also a fully operational, manually operated Otis elevator, which we still have here now and operates the same way that it did in 1927.
As the Winter Garden downtown area began to decline in the late 60s, the Edgewater closed in 1968. It sat empty for some 50 years before a plan was put in place to remodel the hotel, staying true to its original design.
We had to go through the process of doing a complete historic restoration on the property so that when people came into the hotel when we reopened it, that they would have a more authentic 1920s, 1930s experience. When you walk into the lobby down here, I'm going to be able to transport you back in time and have furniture and decorations that are in the style of the 1920s and 30s. And they get to stay in each of the individually decorated rooms where we have beds and furniture that are in the style of the 1920s. Keeping the history of the hotel and the history of Winter Garden alive is our main objective. When people come to the hotel, that they have a sense of the past.
The Edgewater Hotel now operates as a bed and breakfast, but it still has a sink area designated just for cleaning your fish. Many of us movie lovers might remember the World War II film The Flying Tigers, starring John Wayne. Well, one of the real flying tigers, George McMillan, is from right here in Winter Garden.
Flying Tigers, the new American Air Force over China.
George McMillan is our hometown hero. During World War II, he signed on with the Flying Tigers, an elite squadron of bombers who worked with the Chinese Air Force almost surreptitiously in their struggle against Imperial Japan. He flew a lot of missions, came back to Winter Garden a hero, parades and recognition, medals. They gave him a watch at a special presentation at the Garden Theater. Being a military guy at heart and really wanting to serve his country, he signed on again and flew more missions over Southeast Asia, and sadly was shot down in 1944. So George McMillan is very special to us.
He is our hero, and it's kind of amazing because here he was from a prominent family that could have done anything he wanted to do, but he chose to go and fight for the freedom of the country, and I think that's remarkable, really.
Rodriguez's father was one of the town barbers at the time and still remembers the effect that McMillan's death had.
As a town barber, my dad cut everybody's hair from the time they were very young, you know, and he would come home and sit at the supper table and sometimes just put his head down between his hands and he'd cry. And Mother said, "What is it?" He said, "Well, I lost another one of my boys today." So it was very hard because he had known them since they were children and all the way up.
In 1937, a different kind of hero emerged in Winter Garden. William Maxey, along with his wife Juanita, came from Daytona Beach to run the Winter Garden Colored School. He became principal and his wife a teacher.
William and Juanita Maxey are who we call citizen heroes. They came to the Winter Garden area to help educate the African American kids of Winter Garden who were not getting the education they needed and deserved. The little wooden school that the children did attend occasionally, a couple of days a week, was eventually enlarged and upgraded by the Maxeys and the teachers they hired. It kept expanding and expanding, so that by 1957, we had a high school for African American students called Drew High School on the east side of town. They made sure these children had self-esteem, got an education, and they opened the doors for a lot of children.
William Maxey served as principal for 28 years, while his wife Juanita was a teacher for 45. In 1965, the new William Maxey Elementary School was opened in Winter Garden, named in honor of the persevering principal who succeeded at a difficult job in difficult times.
Winter Garden was built on the peel of an orange. That's what people like to say.
Even though the citrus industry was being slowed by several freezes, by the 1950s, the citrus industry was booming once again.
As more acres were devoted to orange growing, more and more people got involved. It seems like in the Winter Garden area, you either owned thousands of acres of orange groves or worked for someone who owned thousands of acres of orange groves. There were packing houses lined up along the railroad lines, which were working all through the season. Anybody who needed a job could work in the packing industry, either in the fields or in the packing houses. We were all about citrus.
In 1949, the Tavares and Gulf Railroad generated more perishable freight per mile of track than any Class I road in the United States.
At one point, we were rightly, truthfully, the largest shipping center on the planet for citrus and vegetables. More freight came out of here on the two railroad lines than any other place on the planet.
Citrus was king, and downtown Winter Garden was booming in the 1950s. Businessmen like Hoyle Pounds were selling cars and tractors.
Mr. Hoyle was a wonderful character. Didn't say much, and had you gone to Pounds Motors, you would have thought he was one of the workers. You never would have picked him out as the owner. He had the Ford dealership here, but I remember my dad, of course, was very poor, as most people were during the Depression, and Mr. Pounds in the barber chair one day said, "You need a car." Dad said, "You know, Mr. Hoyle, I do," but said, "I don't have any money. Don't remember mentioning money. Come get your car. Pay me when you can."
His company was the largest Case tractor dealership in the Southeast. All agricultural tractors across the country had big rivets on their wheels. They didn't have any rubber tire, and when they crossed the road, it was a clay road, nobody cared, but when they paved it, then everybody started caring. So he developed this rubber tire. It was not inflatable, it was a solid rubber tire. For a little town, that's a big deal.
To further serve his community, Hoyle Pounds was also the Winter Garden Fire Chief, a volunteer job with no pay and one that he held for almost 40 years. Another hotspot in downtown Winter Garden in the 1950s was the A.D. Mims Barbershop.
Oh, good memories, A.D. Mims Barbershop. That's where I used to get my hair cut. A.D. Mims was the county commissioner for a number of years representing this district. So if you wanted to talk to the county commissioner, you didn't call his office and his secretary, you went to the barbershop. Not always to get a haircut. You just wanted to be sure he knew that your ditch needed to be cleaned out. You know, we have today all these fancy commissioners with all these secretaries and everything. They don't know half as much as A.D. Mims knew because he talked to the people every day. And that was not all bad.
Another historic landmark in downtown was the Garden Theater.
The Garden Theater is a special place to us. It was built in 1935, and it was a major draw. That place was 600 seats originally, and just packed.
It was the first theater built for movies, for talkies in the 30s. During the war, it was an active place where you could come and get the newsreels, and you could socialize with people, and this was the happening place of Winter Garden.
In the 1950s, when Highway 50 came through on the outskirts of Winter Garden, it started to draw a lot of the businesses away from downtown. Eventually, the downtown area started to struggle, and in 1963, the theater closed.
Hoyle Pounds next door, who had his tractor business and Ford dealership, bought the theater when it closed in 1963, turned it into a warehouse, took everything out, straightened out the floor. You wouldn't know it was a movie theater from inside, and he used it for storage.
Years later, when Pounds Motors closed, the Winter Garden Heritage Foundation was instrumental in buying the theater and refurbishing it.
In a very short period of time, we transformed a very empty shell into a 299-seat performing arts center that was unlike anything in West Orange County.
When we went to reopen it, rehabilitate it after 2003, Irv Lipscomb, who's on our board, remember taking photographs in 1955 of the interior of the theater. He's a movie buff, so we used those photos to reproduce the inside of the theater. The Romeo and Juliet balconies, the raked floors back. So what you see today is basically how it looked when it opened in 1935.
We've been blessed with wonderful staff and support and a community that just happened to be, I think, ripe and ready for it, and become the anchor tenant of downtown Winter Garden.
The Winter Garden Theater is home to plays, concerts, and movies. When the theater reopened in 2008 after a big remodel, it served about 10,000 patrons. Today, it serves more than 70,000. Another notable location in downtown Winter Garden is First Baptist Church. It was first located in Ocoee back in the 1880s. That was until one day one of the city's founding fathers, J.L. Dillard, offered the church a nice piece of property and $250 to move their congregation to Winter Garden. The church's members made the move to Winter Garden in 1896. The church and the congregation has continued to grow through the years, but the church at the corner of Plant Street and Dillard Street remains one of the city's most historic landmarks. Another notable location is Winter Garden's VFW Post 63. An interesting feature of the construction of the building is the use of split cypress on the exteriors, giving each course of siding a cambered appearance. A really special use for the building was in April of 1997, when an HBO movie group used the Legion home to shoot From the Earth to the Moon, with actor, director, and executive producer Tom Hanks in the lead role. Through about a century and a half of its history, Winter Garden has been on a little bit of a roller coaster ride. The prosperity of the boom in the 1920s would eventually take a downhill turn by the 1950s. Highway 50 passed on the outskirts of Winter Garden, and businesses were leaving downtown. In the 1980s, there were 3 big freezes that almost ended the citrus industry. Disney had recently moved into Florida, and citrus growers began selling their land to developers. In the 1990s, downtown Winter Garden was almost a ghost town. But then town manager Hollis Holden went to work.
Hollis Holden. He's the one that had the vision to put Winter Garden in a new place with a new mission.
Hollis's key thing when he came in here, he fixed the utility company, straightened a lot of that out, and he invested doing all the utility work, the pipes, stormwater, wastewater, expanded the wastewater treatment plant. What people don't realize is from 1990s to early 2000s, that didn't seem to make a lot of difference on the surface, but without that, building the infrastructure, none of the next 10 years would have happened. So that was critical to the success of Winter Garden, and Hollis was a primary driver of that.
City leaders adopted the Field of Dreams philosophy. Build it and they'll come. And it has certainly paid off.
We did the downtown, did streetscapes and such, invested a lot of money in infrastructure, and sure enough, the private investment followed. You have to look at what assets you have to start with, because every city's different. And then you have to figure out what those assets are and determine how do you build upon those assets to improve.
One of those assets was the West Orange Trail, which goes right through the heart of downtown Winter Garden.
When the trail was completed, I guess between 96 and 98, it made absolutely no difference to Winter Garden. It didn't change us one bit. But then when we did our investment in our downtown building upon the trail, once we completed that in 2003, then it made all the difference in the world. Then the people using the trail not only rode through Winter Garden, they decided to stop and spend some money here.
Winter Garden's kind of like the epicenter of it all. It's probably one of the neatest places along the trail because of the shopping districts and all the things that it offers. And, you know, you find all types of riders out here. Everybody kind of commingles. Everybody enjoys the atmosphere, so it's a great place.
We kind of really built this business around the trail of having families and people from all over come here. This is a historic downtown. It's a great place to visit.
Part of the charm of Winter Garden is that it has preserved its historic past. Walking down Plant Street is like taking a trip back in time.
The Winter Garden that people are drawn to today, I mean, hundreds of thousands of visitors from all over the world, they're amazed at how this town is preserved. This town, luckily, just preserved its architecture. Those buildings stayed along Plant and Main Street, practically every one, and owners used them for storage or warehousing, but they didn't tear them down.
We had a mantra very early on we used to say is, if we lose the charm that defines our city in the process of redevelopment, we will have failed. So our goal all along was to maintain that history and charm and build upon it. And we think that's what separates us from a lot of other communities.
Lake Apopka and its fishing were one of the reasons for Winter Garden's early tourism boom. But when the lake went bad, so did business.
Lake Apopka is the 4th largest lake in Florida, but over the years there were a lot of impacts where agricultural runoff and stormwater runoff ran into it to the point that it was known as Florida's largest, most polluted lake.
I like to think of the lake as the battery for this area. It attracted the Native Americans, it attracted the settlers. Then the battery got discharged because of all the bad things that happened to it, and now that battery is being recharged. It's drawing life back to the lake.
The state of Florida provides funding for the cleanup, which is a cooperative effort between the St. Johns River Water Management District, the EPA, and local residents.
When you go out onto this lake, it's difficult to see the shoreline. It's almost like being in a small ocean. When you think of the amount of nutrients that are in there, this is a kind of rejuvenation that doesn't happen overnight, but it's remarkable the difference. Lake Apopka is seeing this rebirth, and so are these communities. You know, it's been a really big turnaround.
As that lake improves, it's just another great asset for us to build upon that makes Winter Garden a great community.
Folks come from everywhere to ride the trail and experience the history in Winter Garden. But on Saturdays, it's an even busier place, as huge crowds flock to the farmers market.
It's great because there's a lot of people that come from all over the Central Florida area, and then you're helping the farmers, the local vendors who are doing new products and new things to bring to you, food-wise and plant-wise. So it's a great mix of everything all in one place.
Right now we get 6,000 people every Saturday at the farmers market, and that's just going to continue to grow.
In fact, the farmers market's success is the foundation for one of the city's newest projects.
One of our big projects called Tucker Ranch. A key part of this is a 20-acre farm where we're going to have a 1-acre greenhouse and 3 to 4 acres of field crops, and we're going to grow between 500,000 pounds and 1 million pounds of organic produce every year. We're literally going to grow produce to sell in our farmers market, so our residents will be able to find a place to buy very affordable organic food and quality produce, because it's one of the most successful farmers markets around.
Winter Garden has managed to reinvent itself while preserving its historic charm, a vision that continues today.
We wanted to build our city based on a quality of life. Our mission statement is to be the best small city in the state of Florida and the best small city in the country, is so to continually work to improve whatever we have, look where our weaknesses are, and improve on those.
Coming here because, I mean, first of all, this beautiful fountain, it's so picturesque. We love the vintage look of all the stores. The farmers market is a big draw. You see all those fresh vegetables, all the people getting together. It's just a great atmosphere. It's family friendly. We love it.
What you see is what it was, except updated. People love that. And Winter Garden now being on the map as a destination of historic preservation just draws those people who want to visit those shops and bask in the history that we've preserved.
The city of Winter Garden itself has done a fabulous job at revitalizing downtown Winter Garden. It's a thriving area. Once again, it's a hot spot.
It's not often you get to be a part of changing a community, and to have seen it from the vibrant community it was when I was a kid to not so much a blighted community, and then back to being so vibrant and full of youth and vitality is an incredible experience.
I think the town has always had a kindness, and even today I think that pervades. There's a friendliness, and there's a lot of that here.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Central Florida Road Trip. Make sure you tune in next time as we continue to explore the rich history that surrounds us all every day right here in Central Florida. I'm Dr. Phil Hoffman. We'll see you next time on Central Florida Road Trip.
This program is brought to you in part by the Paul B. Hunter and Constance D. Hunter Charitable Foundation, Incorporated, a proud partner of WUCF-TV and the Central Florida community.